And we're live. Well, welcome back to the future of. And today we're going to be talking about the future of business and digital transformation. I'm so excited because number one, this is my very first conversation with not one, but two special guests. So this is it's a first time for everything we're already living in the future. So I'm here today with Vaclav Vincalek from Future Infinitive, and also from Future Infinitive, Ken Dobell. So I will be asking you guys for your origin story in a moment before we get into this conversation. But I just want to sort of set the table here for our conversation. So currently we're in an unusual business environment. We're in the middle of a pandemic, totally unprecedented. So, and just not cool. So how our business is responding, there's a lot of talk about digital transformation, about pivoting their businesses, maybe going online, changing things up that maybe should have got changed a while back. And I think the conversation here is about things that maybe you can, maybe companies are doing now, but maybe companies already should have been doing, can be doing it at any time. And we're also going to look at the future of where this is all headed, how companies, how businesses might be operating very differently in the short, medium, and long-term future. So let's just first let me introduce my guests. And I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm your host, Jonathon Narvey, the founder of MindMeld PR. I always forget to do that for some reason. So yeah, that's who I am. And that's all you really need to know about me. I like to talk a lot. So we're gonna kick off first with Ken. Maybe you can just very briefly give your origin story, your connection to Future Infinitive. Why should we trust a word that comes out of your mouth? Go ahead.
Well, thank you for having me. I guess why you should trust a word I say is that I've been on all sides of the table for so long that I don't care anymore. So I have no agenda left. I've been on the technology side, on the media side, the advertising and marketing side. I've been on the client side as a VP marketing. I've typically run back streaming to the agency side as someone who is a frustrated artist in every capacity. So my actual origin story is frustrated writer, frustrated musician, frustrated actor, and my deep background is in creative as a creative director. So all those things mean I'm an artist trapped in a businessman's body. But in that regard, I've been for now 5 or 6 years, mostly consulting independently and working as an advisor, but also as a fractional CMO. And it's in that capacity that I met Vaclav. We've partnered on a couple of different projects already. I think in a very professional way, we fell in love on day one. We share a lot of perspectives in common, and I think not to take words away from Vaclav or put them in his mouth, but one thing he has said to me in the past, which I really cottoned on to, was don't do wrong things. And I think what he might have meant was don't do the wrong things. But and I think that's good advice. But I think that literally not to do wrong things, don't focus on wrong things, is a really powerful message in this time especially. So Future Infinitive as a project is created to be what we call an executive resource firm. So we collaborate with CEOs and their teams to help identify sustainable value in business models. and focus a transformational vision. We work to align and implement strategies for brand and marketing, for operations, for people, technology, operations, and data. And so I guess we'll come back to that in the context, especially of today's transformation. But that's where my focus is for this conversation, is really around how can businesses transform in a context where I think transformation, especially digital transformation, might be a bankrupt term. It's certainly lost a lot of value from overuse and abuse.
Yeah,
but there's a lot there.
Well, we'll be getting into all that very shortly. That was a very fulsome introduction. So I'm very sorry, Vaclav, but we're just going to have to cut you out entirely. Oh, no, wait, I'm hearing from my producer. So going over to Vaclav, apparently, beaming in from the United Nations. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's okay, Jonathon. And I told you that's why you should always start with Ken, because he's far more eloquent how he says things. And that I would have only a few things to add to it, because really Ken describe things very well. So where I see the huge synergy between Ken and myself is that I always saw things from the technology point of view, and I was not able to appreciate enough the marketing side of things. That was, and the reason for it is because I never worked with a marketing person who truly understood what marketing is and the part of strategy and execution. And where we complement, I would say quite nicely, is that nothing within the organization exists in a vacuum. You cannot say that the company should be marketing driven. You cannot say that the company should be technology or product driven. It's always from perspective of that person who says that. And I think that the magic which organizations should achieve is to find the right mix and within the right context push the agenda, whether it's a marketing, whether it's a technology, whether it's a product, they should push it forward in the right context. And where we work really nicely is that the technology should always support the marketing. If not, technology is not the product, but it helps then the marketing people to achieve far more than what they would do on their own. Because, and this is again what Ken touched nicely on, it's about the data. And once you have the data, it can help the marketing to do even more and even better.
Yeah.
So that's one point. Yes.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Can you guys hear that? It sounds like there's renovations going on in the next room. So if you can't hear it, that's great. We'll just continue. Oh, it was on a second ago. Okay, good.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
And also,
is that literally the sound of transformation taking place the next room?
Wow! Wow!
The other, I think, important point. We start talking about transformation, digital transformation, and I think it's very well as Ken put it. It's a bankrupt marketing term. Which I don't understand why suddenly it should be digital transformation, why it should be transformation. It's any organization has to keep adapting to market, has to adapt to customer, has to adapt to new realities which are outside of the organization and some internal forces perhaps. And so to say that suddenly we're going into digital transformation is absolute nonsense. If the company has to wait for somebody to tell them that there is a new trend outside, which is digital transformation, they are not doing their homework. They are just within their cubicles, not understanding that they have to keep changing. So I think that And I think that would be now prequel to your questions about, we live in different situations, perhaps, but organizations who adapt to it the best are the ones who change is in the DNA of the organization. And as new reality outside, which they have no influence over, happens, then that's when they have to adjust the organization. If you want to call it transformation, sure. If you want to call it digital transformation, doesn't matter. But you still have to move the organization to new reality.
I think those are all fair points, and we've discussed this aspect of digital transformation in the past, and that it's, we want to get beyond the buzzwords and really help people understand change is just something that happens in organizations and businesses all the time. I want to get into some specific cases that, before we talk about the future, let's talk about a little bit about the present. I'll grant you that, companies are calling what they're doing digital transformation as they are pivoting, sometimes quite rapidly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. But, whatever they're calling it, let's for our listeners or for our viewers, let's nail down some examples of what you've seen. What are some interesting examples of digital transformation or just change, adapting to present circumstances? What's caught your eye in terms of digital transformation? Ken, did you want to lead off?
Sure. Well, I can give you a couple examples where I think the current crisis with COVID-19 presents a tremendous opportunity to leapfrog ahead to a future vision. So to just reiterate a point that Vaclav made, I mean, that future vision already has to be in mind. Companies should be transforming all the time. And, Jonathon, you just said change happens, but it's better when it happens intentionally, when it's intentional change and it happens all the time. A term we used to hear a lot in the 90s and 2000s initially was cannibalization. I don't hear that so much anymore, but cannibalization is a good example of really intentional change. It's taking a step back to take two forward. And that's exactly the kind of leapfrogging opportunity we see today. I'm working with one organization that has an outdated, I should maybe say antiquated, sales model. That it has just a legacy sales model, which is human powered, and it happens on the doorstep. It's done through face to face. It's not scalable. It's not modern.
Is there anything you want?
And
anything at all, or are you good?
What is that? What's going on there? We got some echo.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Continue, Ken.
Yeah. It's Vaclav's army of minions, I think, offering to service him. So, yeah, I'm just saying that there are, in this particular example, the company I'm working with has an antiquated sales model, which is basically a door-to-door sales model. And under the circumstances with COVID-19, that is simply not on. It cannot happen. So although there was already a plan to move away from such a sales model as part of an organization-wide transformation, if you like, this crisis is an opportunity to go straight to step 3. So there's no gradual handing off, there's no transition. The opportunity is to say, well, that's off the table now, so we might as well move straight to the next one. And rather than have a hybrid period, let's go to a digital-only, mobile-first kind of model. Another example I could give you is on the high-tech manufacturing side, where the clients are often in oil and gas. where the price of oil at $20 on top of the COVID-19 crisis means that the customers cannot use the technology on site at their oil and gas client. So the end customer has its own issues, and what is a manufacturer to do? Well, how about fast forwarding to the future model, the future state, where the sensors and the probes are not held in human hands; they're delivered on robots as payloads. Just another example. So
sure. Sorry, Ken, I think those are excellent examples. And honestly, I hadn't even been thinking of those in the context of the current pandemic. And those are probably have been long-standing ones. I was thinking also along the lines of business models, like you see gyms that they've closed up, or fitness instructors who are now teaching on purely online. You've got companies that offer courses like Thinkific, and I think there's Coursera and a number of others that, online learning is huge. Meditation apps are huge. And so they're,
but again, these are forward-moving changes. These are alterations of the business model that preserve the core value proposition. I mean, think about dentists with virtual waiting rooms in the parking lot. In the future, in the immediate future, you will book your appointment from your vehicle or from your home. You will wait, outside the office. These kinds of things are probably. You talk about online learning. I don't know that we will go to an online-only model, but I'm pretty sure we won't go back to a bricks and mortar only model for all kinds of learning delivery. And so there's this idea of there are pent-up changes that are just looking for an excuse to be made, and this is that moment of truth where the courage of the convictions comes into play. But they're very much the success of them, I want to say, is directly tied to the clarity of that core value. Is if you can understand what it is that you are on this green earth to deliver as value as an organization, then there is that one immutable element, which is the only element at the center of an expanding galaxy that never changes.
I think that's a really interesting point, in that, staying true to yourself as a business. What are your core values? It's sort of how you think. Human beings, we think of ourselves as I'm some kind of an entity inside my head. There's this illusion that you exist inside your head, and you move your meat vehicle around to get to where you need to go. But and even though your body is constantly changing, and you're learning and changing and evolving over time, there's an illusion that you're fundamentally you're the same person you've always been, haven't you? Since you were first conscious. But partly it's an illusion, but partly it's very, very true. And that, this comes down to the cliche of, people don't really change, but on a more positive note, it's what are your values that are consistently there? So getting from the human to the business, what are your corporate values? What are your goals? What are your objectives? And this is where we segue over to Vaclav, who can talk more about the strategy side of digital transformation, the aligning technology with business objectives. I want to hear from Vaclav about, maybe there's some other interesting examples he's seen from, companies that are doing digital transformation right in the short term, right now during the COVID scene. I'm happy to, you can throw in examples that, have been happening for a longer time period. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the challenges involved with digital transformation, how companies are evolving through that, or solving that problem of the problems of digital transformation. And after that, we're going to get into how you do digital transformation, or help companies do digital transformation through Future Infinitive. So that was a lot to unpack. Vaclav, I'm gonna.
Okay,
okay,
yes,
you got it.
because
Okay.
yeah, well, I do. I think I remember only the last one. Too much to unpack. So, you know, I found that when you're running business, when you do business, it's always best for the sanity and for focus, not to start using these big words. You know, once you say, "Oh, we are in the middle of pandemic and this is unprecedented situation." Okay, so we are, yes. Now what? Because then you set up context for the change, and it will distract you from focusing then really what's required. So if you can push yourself to have as little emotions about it, or as little distraction, and as again Ken was saying about the real value proposition which you bring to the market, to the customer, and then see if you can pivot around it, or if you can digitally transition around that. And it is the clarity of the thought which helps you to understand where you are and when you could be. So unlike Ken, I grew up mostly with technology. I started working with computers before actually there were any computers. And I remember punch card and paper tapes and disk drives, which were the size of big cake. And so that would be, 30 plus years. And so to me, technology was always intuitive and easy to do. And what, going to your question, or to the context, what you put it, to how you frame the question, I found it the most difficult part of any transition is the mind transition or transformation. The technology, I can come up with, you throw a problem at me and I can list you 5 technologies which you can use right now. And in my head, I can immediately see how you connect everything. That's the easy part. To be able to then map it into the business and how to transform the business, because this is the very difficult part, which for outside, let's say, consultants, or for outside people, sometimes they don't appreciate the fact that the company still has to produce something. The company still has to have a cash flow. This company still has to operate and satisfy their current customers, and at the same time they have to do the transition, and that's I would say probably the most difficult part on this whole thing. And so when you add to it saying and we have to transition, we have to transform, and it's during pandemic, and we have to suddenly deal with HR issues, we have to deal with health issues. That's a tall order. That's a very tricky one. So if you can start removing certain aspects of that and really try to focus on the business piece, it helps you perhaps to gain the clarity and then focus on execution. So one difficult part, of course, is how to build a strategy, how to think how we can go forward, and then design the execution piece. That's the challenge. And the technology that falls so nicely into place, always, every single time.
Perfect. Well, that's a lot right there, outlining very, very well the challenges. And I liked how you talked about the mindset involved, that's the biggest change that needs to happen. I mean, easy for you to say because
Well,
you
you know how.
understand all the technology.
Well, perhaps, but think about it. How difficult it is to go and buy a new computer. How difficult it is to buy new software. How difficult it is to do these things. These are, I would say, actually very well understood parts. But one day you have this software, another day you have this software. There's a path how to migrate from one software package to another. That's straightforward. It can be timely, or it might require time to do it. It might be expensive. All this, that's true. But don't forget, at the same time, you have to retrain people, and you have to change their mind, because suddenly you're telling them for they were doing something for the last 5, 10, 20 years, that they live now in different world, and they have to learn this. Right now we're working with one customer, which almost everything is on paper, not just individual workstations, or it's on paper. And there are people who work at the company for 5, 10, 15, even 20 years. And now you go there and say, well, okay, people, how difficult it is to get few servers, just connect them. And now, from now on, everything is in this software package, and they will be absolutely lost. So how do you transform that? So to Ken's point, to say, okay, what was the value proposition from the customer, from the company to the customer? And how do you then guide them through the transformation? That's the challenge. And that's what we do.
Excellent. Well, let's break that down a little bit further. We're going to go back to Ken. And I love how, sorry, I just got an alert from Zoom. Running out of time? This meeting will end in 10 minutes. So
it's okay.
I guess, we're going to have to cut this. Sorry, Ken. I know you love to talk just like me. So
next time I'll host the meeting.
Yeah. So go ahead. I'd like you to break down briefly just how you do digital transformation for companies at Future Infinitive. Just sort of break down, step by step. What do you actually do?
Well, I think that my favorite analogy is the old riddle about how the farmer gets across the river with the cabbage and the chicken and the fox, and in such a way that the fox doesn't eat the chicken and the chicken doesn't eat the cabbage. You can't take them all at once. So of course the answer is that you got to take the fox and the cabbage across and leave the chicken, and then leave the cabbage or fox, and then come back with or however it works. And so you got to get across your own way based on that sustainable value, that unique sustainable value, which is, in this case, the chicken and the fox and the cabbage. There is another way to go, which is typically the highway. It's the way all the other companies are going. We just said, digital transformation and transformation in general is a trend. It's a fashion. It's a buzzword. So obviously there are consulting firms, there are suppliers, there are solutions, there are platforms, there are all kinds of actors and intermediaries who are all over this because they're smelling the money to be made, and that's normal. But what it creates is a false sense of normalcy, a false sense of a standard procedure or a standard path, where if I want to get to the other side of the river, I need to cross the bridge, just like everyone else. But to cross the bridge, I may have to get a car. I may not have a car. I may have to fill that car with gas. I may have to learn how to drive and avoid having an accident. I may have to avoid traffic and get to the other side. And what happens when I get to the other side? Where am I going? How do I, and there are a lot of reasons why that bridge that everyone is taking, be it the leading supplier in the space, or the leading consulting firm with the offering that with the highest ticket price or whatever, may not be appropriate. And so what we do is we say, let's start by identifying that sustainable value, and let's figure out where it is we're going, and then we'll build a path, and then we'll get you there. So probably the one thing that you will find at Future Infinitive that you will not find at any similar looking offering is that we will leave you a resource. So should you hire a chief transformation officer on a permanent full-time basis? Of course you should. But that's when you get to the other side of the river and you still have to get through the jungle. Between now and then, we're going to put someone in place, a turnaround COO or transformation officer, or someone who can work on people and culture and set the KPIs and begin tracking progress towards those KPIs. And that person will stay for a week or a month or a year until the job is done, until you're on the other side. And I think that's critical because I'm sure we could fill a library like the one behind you with stories of companies who've received a really thick package of recommendations and have no idea how to implement them.
Except that the results you bring will be far more genuine and meaningful and actually exist compared to the library behind me. So there you go. Okay, I think that's fantastic. It's been a wonderful conversation. Vaclav, any final thoughts on what you see for the future of digital transformation? Anything at all?
You know, there are you can see it from two points of views. It's really difficult because you have to think really, really hard, and that's sometimes which people, because if they never done it, it sounds daunting, and it creates lots of doubts in your mind if it even makes sense. And so now the current situation is probably pushing you to suddenly rethink stuff. On the other hand, I always find it's almost common sense, because if it doesn't sound right, well, it doesn't sound right. And so you can look at these things from two perspectives and find that the middle ground is like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we can support it with numbers, we can support it with data, we can support it with interviewing the customers. And it would make sense. And what we always find that actually people in the organizations, they intuitively know what they have to do. And sometimes we just help them to express it properly. So then they say, yes, that's exactly what I meant. And that also then helps the organization to move to new direction, because suddenly feel they own it. And that's what Ken was saying. We help them to get across the river, through the jungle, but it's them who's getting there. We help them to guide, we show them the path, but it's them to do the stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a terrific way to conclude, because you know, it's an interesting point that they sort of already know what they need to do a little bit. You can bring the knowledge, the expertise, the processes, but part of it is they kind of need the yes, you're okay, this plan is good. They need that confidence booster to take the step, which is a big step.
So like the old joke about how many psychologists it takes to change a light bulb.
How does it go?
Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change. And
that is an even more perfect ending to this conversation. Thank you, Ken. It has just been a blast chatting with you both. We could go on for hours, but Zoom won't let us. So my last questions to you both. Ken, very quickly, if someone wanted to learn about Future Infinitive or just learn about you, how would they find you online?
futureinfinitive.com.
Okay, perfect. And Vaclav?
Same thing.
Okay, Vaclav Vincalek on futureinfinitive.com, and you're both on LinkedIn. So fantastic. And you know, I've noticed a lot of news about you, Vaclav. So you seem like you are in the public eye quite a bit.
Well, that's part of the effort not to get trapped with the illusion of middle-age crisis. So I have to channel my energy somewhere, somehow. And so that's why I'm trying to express my thoughts through various means. This one is one. many conversations with Ken, and then also trying to put the thoughts on the virtual paper, if you will.
Perfect.
Very important.
Okay, well, guys, it has been a pleasure. You have been listening to The Future of Business and Digital Transformation. I am your host, Jonathon Narvey, and I will see you next time on The Future of.